Cyril said. Yes, but it would have been one thing if the waste were restricted to the one life of Godfrey Poskett and the discreet misfortune that it ended badly. The waste has been so much more ruinous than that. My poor mother, the carers, even our kids before they stopped visiting. I'm so glad I gave them permission to give up the pretense of being loving grandchildren. Because what was the point? Most of the time he didn't know who they were, and all they got for going out of their way was abuse. It was physically so unpleasant as well. My mother and I tried, but managing the nappies alone was such a trial, because he fought and kicked a great deal, and sometimes, which was mortifying, got a soft little erection. Honestly, my own father. So it put off changing him, and he often smelt. In spite of all that, it was decent of two of his grandchildren to make an appearance today. Of course Simon came. He's so duty-bound and hyper-responsible that for pity's sake at 26 he's almost middle-aged. And whilst I appreciated that she showed up, if only for my mother, naturally Hayley had to be late, allowing for the usual showy entrance and calling attention to herself. Why, I reckon she planned it, watching a bit of telly beforehand, just to ensure she'd not be boringly on time. Roy's absconding in the end was predictable as well. Being a grandson is simply one more undertaking that he can't follow through on. As for the waste, Cyril said, looping back, you omitted a conspicuous casualty. Yourself. Best that her husband said it. I hesitate to calculate how many cumulative years of my life that man's infinite dotage managed to destroy. At least you miraculously managed to keep working. It was the leisure time your father hoovered up. The evenings and weekends, the early mornings, the emergency trips to Maida Vale in the middle of the night, all time you might have spent with me. So you're the injured party. Merely one more. Restless, Kay got up to sweep some crumbs from the corian beside the sink, casting a mournful eye at the half-built would-be conservatory off the kitchen. A work in progress for the last 2 years, and another victim sucked into her father's whirlpool of limitless need. These days the children seemed so envious, but she and Cyril had bought this house in 1972, once they'd found out Kay was pregnant with Hayley and needed more room. And in those days, not only was the whole country a wreck, but so was Lambeth, which was why such a grand structure, if south of the river, had been within the means of an NHS nurse and a GP. These 3 stories and loft to boot had only looked grand from the outside. Good gracious, fixer-upper didn't begin to describe it. Now that 19 years of cost overruns and inconvenience were at last rounding on a habitable property, the kids tended to forget having to step over clatters of raw lumber on the way to the loo, or shaking crumbles of plasterboard from their hair before school. They put out of mind, too, the warnings in their childhoods about hurrying home from the tube, because the neighbourhood in those days was beyond dodgy. No, they didn't see a financial stretch for a young couple on the public payroll, who took on a considerable risk that the whole tumble-down interior would collapse ceiling to floor like a portable coffee cup. All the children saw now was the imposing, respectable edifice of Mum and Dad's house, a conventional projection of the establishment that they'd never afford for themselves. What with interest rates at 15%, and Roy, if she didn't miss her guess, already saw a kip he might inherit. Roy was always looking for shortcuts. Now with Dad gone, presumably she'd the spare time to finish the conservatory. Yet her appetite for the project had fled. She was already 51. How much longer would they live here? More starkly, how much longer would they live? Kay had imagined that she'd crossed the signal threshold of 50 with aplomb.